with the OJ trial? What do you remember from the OJ trial? The glove didn't fit, you must have quit, right? Yes? Was that the outrage? Why is that outrageous?
Because you can wash the glove and then it shrinks.
Yeah, there's that. But it should have been entered into evidence. But go on, what else? There's something more basic.
You would have to necessarily like wear the glove to use it.
Let's go beyond the glove. Let me name this. People are outraged because a black dude allegedly killed a white woman, paid a fancy lawyer, and got free. All right, so people are outraged that you can buy justice, right? But wait a minute. He didn't do anything that a rich white man in his position wouldn't do. Wait, a rich white man could kill his wife, get a fancy lawyer, and get off, and you not out... How come you're not outraged that you can buy justice? But you're just outraged that a black guy can buy justice. You're not outraged that you can buy justice? Interesting. And let's say that he did it. I mean, I don't like him, so...
If I did do it.
Huh?
He wrote a book that said, if I did do it, this is how...
Yeah. Well, the evidence might suggest that he didn't do it, but I'm willing to believe that he did do it because I don't like him. And the reason I don't like him is for a specific reason. And I told you what my standard of reference for what a black athlete is. A black athlete is a scholar and an activist. OJ did not hang out with the black community. He did not even talk about racism until he got busted. He was no Jim Brown. He was no, he was no Kareem. He was no, all right, none of that. But here's what happened with him and where he came from. Because I'm from Cali and, he went to SC and, I was born in the Haight-Ashbury, so I know that OJ was born in Hunters Point, okay, the projects, and was raised by his black mama. OJ's first wife was black. Now, in the black community, we in LA knew that he was domestically violent with his black wife. Okay? So if he's domestically violent as a pattern with women, what do you think is going to happen when he meets Nicole in a restaurant at 18 when she's a waitress with his wife? And then takes up with Nicole. What do you think is going to happen there? Is he going to be domestically violent, or all of a sudden he's just going to mend his ways? Is it? Okay, so we knew there was domestic violence, right? So let's play that out. So the Nicole number goes like this. In LA County, every 9 days, a woman is killed by her domestic partner in LA County. It happens with that kind of frequency that they can break it down to that rate. Just like we know today, 33 people will die of gun violence in America. 33 people. Same rate, same way we calculate that. In LA County, it's 1 every 9 days. In Lane County, I think it's 1 every 3 weeks to a month. Happens at a constant rate. Okay? Now, where did OJ get... Okay, so OJ said on Geraldo, God made a mistake in making me black.
Who said that?
OJ said that on Geraldo. Okay, you're on national television and you say that. If Mark Harris didn't like you before, I definitely don't like you now. And OJ was held up by white America as a role model for us because he never raised racism until he got busted. He was held up as an example for us to emulate. I got problems with that. That's like, wait, so OJ, did he get that idea from his black mama? No. Did he get that idea from his black wife? Okay, so where did he get that? Okay, so if you're white, okay, if he's black and God made a mistake in making him black, and okay, so if I can't change my skin color, what can I get to show that I've made it? We have the concept of what? Money. What? Got money. What else? Trophy wife. Where did the concept of trophy wife come from? From his black mama?
You have to add the element of drug psychosis.
Oh, well, there's drug psychosis too, because basically you use cocaine.
Well, no, it was speed. It takes 2 days and it's out of your system.
Okay.
When they tested it,
Let's say that there's drug psychosis in there, which, because drug use is also part of success in America, right?
Cato Kalin was his drug.
Okay, right. So however we pull it, we've got multiple factors and systems producing this result. So what people focus on is the glove, not the Nicole number, which if I calculate it correctly, I haven't calculated, I'll get it to you in a day or so. But it's something like 890 women have died in LA County, but you don't know them. Okay, since Nicole died. So close to 1,000 women have died in LA County from domestic violence. We haven't even touched the causes, the structures that are causing domestic violence, one of which could be God made a mistake in making me black, and if I can't have you, nobody can. Right? Because if God made a mistake in making me black, the best thing that I can get is a white woman. That's my symbol of success. And I can hang out with, white folks and the occasional black person, but not really have any connection with the black community. Until, let me get Johnny Cochran. Right? So, looking at sociostructural violence, okay, how come the media didn't focus on domestic violence? If you could believe that he was domestically violent, right? You could. That's why I could believe that he did it. Because the structures are supporting him doing it. His own mind. When he basically says, God made a mistake in making me black, and he's my color, I'm thinking, wow, that's like massive racial self-hatred, which, isn't even a category within American Psychological Association, because, racism doesn't affect you. See the problem? Yeah. Okay. And that was normal. So I'm just saying, not to go off on a rant too much, but there it is. Sociostructural violence does a lot of stuff. So the reason you don't know about it, and if it's the first place you've heard about it, okay. So, protected. The public health strategy of strengthening the host by giving the potential victim or target knowledge, skills, and ability is largely not used, and the sanctions against perpetrators are or can be nullified according to race, social class, or position. Which happened with OJ. It also happens, for example, white males are protected if the targets are white or minority women, particularly in college. How often who believes the perp if a date rape happens? Who's believed, the perp or the victim? Okay. So that's why the case law said, if the perp is a serial rapist, how would we prove that? If most rapes aren't reported without DNA evidence, how do we know that? Right? Now, some jurisdictions have improved their reporting. Look, you can't consent if you're drunk. Consent can't happen if you're drunk. Well, that means she has to come forward and say that she got drunk. There's roofies in her system. Can't consent if you can't remember. You wouldn't take roofies. It's not a prescription drug for people that way. Okay, so institutional and structural violence are higher order phenomena that subsume and supersede personal violence. Examples of microsocial systems in which institutional violence occurs are prisons, mental institutions, and the family. And even though we tend to think that mental institutions are places for healing, he found out differently, and lots of people have found out differently. So, structural violence is a feature of social structures. This form of violence is inherent in the established modes of social relations, distribution of goods and services, and legal practices of dispensing justice. Structural violence involves more than one violation of fairness and justice. All right, so I'm going to move on. So, for example, race is a social construct. That is, it's built up, it's created. It's not necessarily real, but politics and power make it seem like it's real. Okay, so it's artificial, that is, it's created. And it's historical, meaning there is a history that proceeds to the present day. Right? So the indigenous construct here on Turtle Island, 4 races. So in the beginning, Creator created 4 races, one for each of the 4 directions. In the east, where the sun rises, is the yellow race. In the south, where it's warm, is the black race. In the west is the red race, Turtle Island, and in the north is the white race. This is like a several thousand-year-old construct, older than Columbus. How do the natives know about white people before Columbus? Well, white people had been around for 22,000 years. It's quite possible that some natives had gone over to Europe. Of course, that's not in the Columbus discovered America framework and not currently part of this class, so I might incorporate it in the time period next delivery in 2015 if I'm still here. 3 races: European hegemonic, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, that's what CMN means. 5 races, which came out of 3 races. The American, 5 races plus, hegemonic. So 5 races has become the cultural default for America to replicate hegemony. So just define hegemony multiple times: control or dominating influence by one person or group over others, especially by one political group over society or one nation over others. So I want to call your attention to the fact that the indigenous noticing that there are races and racial differences is not the bad thing. Assigning and reinforcing relative value is the bad thing, or the predictable thing. Okay, so pre-contact, racism didn't exist. They noticed that races existed and each one had a place. That is, and not superior to the other, because east isn't superior to west and north isn't superior to south. In this construct, you need all of them to arrive at a complete understanding and the whole story behind. Each one has a history and practice, political practice behind it. So race is a social construct. It's not real, but we treat it politically as if it is. So hegemonic. So white, black, non-Hispanic. Now that's a curious one. Because if there are more black people in Latin America than there are in America, why would you make that exclusion? It's politics. Why do you allow light-skinned Cubans to come but send black-skinned Cubans back as if they're Haitian? Oh, why don't aren't Haitians allowed to come? Hispanic, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, American Indian, Alaska Native, and other, multiracial.
Can you repeat the distinction between why they make black with in parentheses non-Hispanic?
Black people who are not from a Spanish-speaking country, which puts Brazil in an interesting place, right? Especially if you go to Brazil and you see the numbers of colors and stuff like that there. In fact, within Latin America, so they will actually have. So, for example, there's a racial hierarchy in Spanish, which starts with blanco, white, Moreno. Okay, so this is basically the mixture with different groups. So Moreno is if you're mixed with black or you look black. Mestizo is with Indians. And you'll find this interesting hierarchy about people being willing to claim their Indian side but not the black side, even if, right? Right. Then Zambo. So this is Mexico, but various other groups have, their own words for it. And as was reported within George magazine, basically the people that accompanied Elian, where the guy just referred to the girlfriend's boyfriend who would normally have been sent back, but because they found him a job, because he would have been sent back. Is there a hand back there? No? Okay. Zambo is equivalent to Sambo. Right? So people are making distinctions based on skin color, et cetera, et cetera. Where that came, it was political. Right? I would guess, this is a guess, my opinion, right? That was done probably because of Mexico. Okay? Because if we go to war against Mexico, essentially to preserve slavery, and the president of Mexico is a black Indian who basically says, we've eliminated slavery, and we designed the Mexican flag to say, okay, we all got red blood, whether we come from Europe, whether we're native, or we're African. Because he's a black Indian speaking Spanish. Or you're Castilian Spanish. Blanco. Okay, we're all Mexican. We fought the war against Spain. We're all free under the flag. Okay? Racial harmony. That's what it explicitly means. The red, white, and blue does not explicitly mean that. All right, so what happens when slavery has been outlawed in Texas, California, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, etc.? Oh, y'all ain't Mexican no more. You American. So can we make racial distinctions now? How do we deal with that contradiction? Oh, well, let's just put it in the closet. You're black. Now, your Spanish heritage is erased. Just like they did with black Native Americans, black Cherokees. Oh, well, you're not Indian. You're freedmen. Because you're too black to be native. Guess who makes that decision and why? Becomes complicated. Complicated dance. Divide and conquer. Yeah, so where are people from the so-called Middle East? Oh, and why do we call it the Middle East? Because I'm just telling you, Morocco, Libya, Egypt, that's Africa. So one might ask, if you're from the Middle East, where do you fit in there? In that construct?
It's shocking. As a North African, you consider it as a white.
Yes. They consider you white. But right, well, it's not true, right? Because you can't pass the paper bag test, for one. Paper bag test, if your skin is darker than a brown paper bag, you're not white.
For the people,
Yeah.
who make this, but you could insult the reference for those people in
Right.
North Africa going down accept it.
Yeah.
So it's an insult.
Yes, it is. Right. So when we talk about other, well, who's other? What's other? What's another? So people from the Middle East could be considered other, or they could be considered Caucasian. I mean, there's a history behind that. There's a political history behind that. But then there's also the racial realpolitik. And then multiracial, which means you can check a bunch of boxes, but then you get the rights and privileges of none. And some folks will say, well, I don't want to identify, which, okay, is a political choice in itself, or a choice with implications. All right, so 5 races plus has become the cultural fault in America to replicate hegemony, essentially. So 3 races basically came from a theory of devolution. I think we talked about this already. Yeah. So the 5 races out of the German university system, which become the English university system, which becomes the American university system, and the Aryan model of Western civilization, that is, democracy, comes from ancient Greece, which were wholly white societies which raised themselves up from savagery. Democracy is presented as a feature of Western civilization only. Columbus discovered America. Christianity civilized the savages. Western democracy is the best model for all humans, etc., etc. All right. I think we did this already. So basically within racism, the divisive practice, the goal is to recreate and reinforce artificial categories based on what you look like. Colorism is internalized racism within a group, just like Lowry talked about in the first Obama inauguration. If you're white, you're all right. If you're yellow, you're mellow. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, get on back. The red man can't get ahead, man. So darker than a brown paper bag, skin privilege, the lighter the better. One who can speak for those others, those darker others. Sociostructural violence, there are structures in society which create or do violence. So for example, you're black. That's just some of the words, right? So this is basically an internal racial hierarchy, right? Based on, your appearance, hair, all that kind of stuff. Blurple, yeah.
So black you look purple.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Now a lot of this time dates, a lot of these words date from when being called black was an insult. I was alive during that time. Yeah.
I was gonna say what I find funny is that us as black people, we like reinforce these ideals. Like,
right.
If you a black dude, like most of the time black dudes go for white girls. But if you can't get a white girl, you want a red bone, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
right.
It's like if you got a dark skinned black girl, like the mother of my child, she's really dark, and all my friends be like, bro, I couldn't never thought you'd be with a dark skinned girl. And I'm like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with, like, I like black women. Like, what's wrong with that? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like us as black people, we used to crack jokes like, "You so black, bro. You like an oil spill." You know what I'm
Right,
saying? Like,
right.
That type
Yeah.
of stuff. I mean, it's funny, but it's not right. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, it became funny because we're basically internalizing pain, and it's a part of the laughing to keep from crying blues tradition. All right? So, black people study this, right? So there's actually a whole, the color complex, a lot of this coming from slavery, a lot of it internally, basically people being suspicious of lighter skinned folks, or basically saying, you know, you're not black enough, or, you know, whatever black means. So, for example, the glamour Barbie. Now, here's an interesting piece. You know I was going to go there, right? You just knew that, right? But I've been going there since before the Super Bowl. So, two of my granddaughters really love Beyonce. You know, put a ring on it, and, you know, they like Willow, with my hair back. Okay. At 5 and 4, you know, 5 and 3.5, 4. You know, I'm not going to argue about. Okay, look, your mama says I'm a proud black woman. Your grandmother says you're a proud black woman. I'm black and I'm proud. We're cool, right, with that. Super Bowl commercial identified. So it was a cosmetic commercial. If you remember that, they identified her first as African American, then Native American, and then French. And what's the implication with French? White. Okay. We're not, even though French citizens come in many colors, the assumption is it's white. Okay. Now, previously, I used to think this hair color and her skin color was a function of computer airbrushing. They call it airbrushing because that's what you do physically, but digitally you can alter somebody's image. Wired magazine had a cover of OJ as a white guy. Right? And basically they were talking about, look, the end of photographs as evidence of anything, because you can doctor a photograph. And certainly they were commenting on, you know, some of his attitudes, right? So, colorism. Set of beliefs. On the other hand, when a group or individual has the power to institutionalize and enforce behaviors, laws, norms, and standards based on beliefs of skin color, superiority or inferiority, then colorism takes on a whole other dimension. So at the institutional level and cultural level, colorism is skin color prejudice plus sanctioning power. And historically, we can see a lot of this stuff, you know, reinforced. We haven't talked about, you know, French colonial society, but they really made a whole thing about race mixing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Armin.
I don't really know, but like, you know, France, obviously that's a nationality, but is it commonly like people that call themselves French, is that like what they would consider a race, or is that just is it only a nationality? Like in most European countries, you know.
What you hear me doing in class is breaking a certain convention. In the 18th, 17th, and 18th, and 19th century, right? So 16, 17, 1800s, and somewhat into the 1900s, where you were from was considered a race. Okay? Race wasn't associated with skin color until about 700 years ago. Okay? When you read in the Bible in Judges, for example, okay, that's two groups of Africans that have that word shibboleth, and how you pronounce the word shibboleth meant whether you were a friend or a foe, and they killed you. based on mispronouncing it right. That's because the only way you could tell the difference wasn't by looking. They're the same folks, which means in that part of the world, they've been kissed by the sun, if you know what I'm saying. Right? Before that, so the convention was you were part of the Greek race, you were part of the Italian race, you were part of the German race, you were part of the Scottish race, and you can find as late as the 19th and early 20th century reference to the Scottish race and the inferiority of the Scottish race. No Irish need apply in New York. Okay, discrimination against Jews, etc., 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 because of, in the Catholic Inquisition, Jews were discriminated because of you have Jewish blood, you have Jewish or Moorish blood in your face. That's skin color. Not because you blushing. That's skin color. So in the Inquisition time, anti-Semitism was strictly about race, not about religion, because people could convert. Oh, we're going to torture you to see if your conversion is correct, because you got too much Jewish or Moorish blood in your face. Right? So that's why it dated back to 700 years ago, about a century before the actual Inquisition, depending on when you date the Inquisition, because you can trace it back to writing. So before that, it was before where you were from as a race. And then you can see, with Blumenbach talking, okay, we're going to shift from where you're from to Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid. Like, Negroid, wait, what's that? If you're following the land-based logic, Caucasus of the Caucasus, Mongoloid of the Mongolia, where's Negroidia? There ain't no Negroidia. If you follow the logic, it should be Africoid, but it's not. Okay? Once you call them by their skin color instead of where they're from, you're breaking from the race as land to, boom, skin color. Now you can take their land.
Different, yeah.
Right.
That's why, like, a lot of people I know, like, there's a movement of people that call themselves Moorish rather than black or anything like that, to tie it back to a historical.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Moorish Science Temple, precursor to the Nation of Islam and all that. Yeah.
That's the same, I always get in arguments with people about Spanish people.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell them, no, Spaniards are European people.
Mm-hmm.
They are originally white people that got conquered by Moors. But I always, kind of have this thing within myself, well, they are Europeans, but they were conquered, and they have, a little more tint than most Europeans, so I don't know,
Because of that, well, for example, so if you're going to use that argument, the distinction you could make is, what did they call themselves? They were Visigoths, which is a subsection of the Goths, which when you say Gothic, oh, well, that's clearly white people. Pale people from cold places, right? And wearing black and whatever else we decide that means,
Same
right?
thing with Italians. People always be like, oh, they're not white, they're Italian. I'm like...
Yeah, okay, tell that to a Sicilian.
That's why.
Right? Tell that to a Sicilian, which they will say, look, okay, if conquest breeds interbreeding, and you're still living in the same place, but you have a darker suntan because of that genetic interbreeding, then what are you? So that's why I'm saying it's an artificial construct that does have political implications, but we take it seriously as if it's real, and it ain't real. But to say that it ain't real is, when it has life or death consequences for people is, so again, that's part of the dual consciousness piece. Got to look at it, how it's affecting you. You then, Armin. And, yeah.
The social impact of using words. For example, like the word moreno, and in Spain it's the N word.
Yes.
In the United States.
Right.
And the word negro is in some places in Africa just black teeth. Right? Just impact in the education system, which is making segregation. People think about race.
Yeah. Good. You were next, Armin.
So, there's a theory that basically that the discrimination, oppression white people, did against, blacks, Native Americans, was actually protected by law because of stripping people from their natural personhood, whereas police can't shoot a black person, especially if they call themselves black, because they're not a person. And I was wondering, like, if you heard it, like, if you, like, what you.
Well, that's no longer in the law, but it might be a socially reinforced attitude. Okay, which because again, so part of race isn't logical, it isn't real. It might not be a type 4. It's not legal and then explicitly put upon as law. But even when you made it illegal, the attitude still persisted and is taught in the family at least, if not in the school system by omission. So it becomes part of your attitude.
I just thought it was an interesting concept that they were actually protected by their own law, like, by law, which is like, so of course they didn't get in trouble.
Well, part of the case law, especially in the use of deadly force, all the cop has to basically prove is that they feared for their life and you weren't complying with their orders. Right? And if they, just like I opened up the class was saying with, Michelle Alexander's piece about cops perjure themselves, no one is going to say on the stand that they acted as part of their racial prejudice while shooting someone. They're not going to say that. Right? But we can basically look at the statistics of who they shoot when they shoot somebody. Yeah? Oscar Grant in Fruitvale. I think there's a movie now called Fruitvale that talks about Oscar Grant in New Year's Eve in the BART station in Oakland. Wait, you're on the ground and the transit cop says he's reaching for his taser. Wait, you're on the ground and handcuffed. What are you using the taser for? You got him controlled. Why are you reaching for a taser? I got the gun instead of the taser. You can't tell the difference when you're firing without looking. Sounds pretty lame as far as training. All right. I'm going to skip this. But you can look at it further, because if you wish, get into, had to do that as the setup. For this guy. So, Martin Robeson Delaney, being called the father of black nationalism. He was first attributed the phrase Africa for the Africans. He was born 1812 in West Virginia of a free mother and a father who had purchased his own freedom in 1823. So basically the status of the child comes from the status of a mom. His paternal grandfather was an African chief, Mandingo. Maternal grandfather, Mandingo prince. Born in the South, he resorted to learning how to read and write illegally. Due to his continued desire to learn, he settled in New York, where he attended the African Free School, which was the first public school in the country. Because schools were segregated or private then. So if you were poor and white, you couldn't go to school. So the African Free School was created to educate black people and also poor whites for free. So that was free. It didn't cost anything, and the curriculum was such that it supported creating people like him. Between 1843 and 46, he published his own newspaper, The Mystery. After that, he worked with Frederick Douglass on his weekly newspaper, The North Star. This is before the Civil War. Just notice that. He entered Harvard Medical School as one of its first black students. In 1959, he traveled to Africa, where he stayed for nearly a year, searching for a suitable location for immigration. So basically, when people are talking about solutions to slavery, some black people are thinking about going back to Africa as free people. Actually, lots of people were thinking about that, but this is not, the whole premise of Lincoln and the Lincoln movie is, let's ship them to Costa Rica, not back to Africa. So the Back to Africa movement, or Africa for Africans, starts before even the Berlin Conference, which we haven't even gotten to yet, but will. Civil War. He receives the Commission of Major. He's the first black man to receive that commission in the Army. Still a doctor. Accomplished author, and of course his favorite subject is history. This book is actually online. Principia of Ethnology, The Origin of Races and Color, with an archaeological compendium of Ethiopian and Egyptian civilization from years of careful examination and inquiry. That's the title. So, when I go on my rants about writing, notice what these folks are doing at the time that they're doing it, and the level of writing that they're writing at. So, his racial consciousness is basically clear from his kids' names. Ramses Placido, after the Egyptian pharaoh, Usamari Ramses II, and the Cuban poet and revolutionary. Note the island, Cuba, and what's going on at the time, and I'll show you what's happening there. Other names include Alexander Dumas, is his kid's name, Saint Cyprien, and Toussaint Louverture. Frederick Douglass said of Delaney, "I thank God for making me a man, simply, but Delaney always thanks him for making him a black man." Hear that, OJ. This is the publication you can find, I've most often found online. The Condition, Elevation, Immigration, and Destiny of the Colored People of the United States, Politically Considered. Colored people is us. It's when we're called colored. And I think it evolved to Negro, and then black, etc. Let's see. It's blank? Oh, okay. Look it up. So the Niger Valley Exploring Party, Chatham, Canada. So notice that we have to get an immigration organization, not in America. We have to immigrate to Canada to get that started. Men and brethren, the time has fully come when we as an oppressed people should do something effectively and use those means adequate to the attainment of the great and long desired end. Do something to meet the actual demands of the present and prospective necessities of the rising generation of our people in this country. To do this, we must occupy a position of entire equality, of unrestricted rights, compromising in fact an acknowledged necessary part of the ruling element of society in which we live. The policy necessary to the preservation of this element must be in our favor, if ever we expect the enjoyment, freedom, sovereignty, and equality of right anywhere. For this purpose and to this end, then, all colored men in favor of immigration out of the United States and opposed to the American colonization schemes of leaving the Western Hemisphere are requested to meet in Cleveland, Ohio on Tuesday, the 24th day of August, 1854, in a great national convention then and there to consider and decide upon the great important subject of immigration from the United States. So this is after going to Africa and looking for suitable places to go colonize or recolonize. Because essentially, remember, Africa this time has got sovereign tribal states going on. So any Americans coming there have to either fit in, colonize, or do something else. So in protests, he goes to Canada, where he continued his medical practice because, well, he can't practice medicine in America on black people necessarily unless they're free, right? And white people won't let him touch them. That's still a belief today. Traveled to Africa to inquire about mass immigration and looking at all those different places. I'll skip over this, you can read it later. Returned to the US in Wilberforce, where his son Toussaint helped recruit volunteers for the famous 54th Massachusetts Volunteers. I think that's the movie Glory, Matthew Broderick and Denzel Washington and other folks. After meeting with Lincoln, he was made a major. Ran unsuccessfully for lieutenant governor as an independent Republican in South Carolina. And he wrote a book called Blake, or The Huts of America. The hero of this novel is a West Indian, black West Indian, who travels throughout the South advocating revolution, later becomes a general of an African insurrectionary force in Cuba. Blake hopes that a victorious insurrection in Cuba and the expulsion of all Americans, Cuba's model African state, will lead to the downfall of slavery in the United States. Now, this is fiction, and fiction has to be believable. So what this says about the population of Cuba at the time is that there's enough black people of like mind to actually pull that off. Now, Cuba has that amount of black people to this day, and that's part of what has continued the beef between America and Cuba, essentially. William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. Du Bois double consciousness. So my standard of what I refer to, well, what is a healthy African American? So, healthy African Americans are multicultural, multidisciplinary, multiplexual, and that's from Samuel Delaney's construct, and I'll talk about multiplex in a little bit. So, multicultural, you remember I used that term monolithic. Mono means one, lithic means rock. So we use the Kaaba as an example. Kaaba is a single piece of stone. Monolithic means they're all the same, inside and outside. Know one, you know them all. Well, we're not monolithic. So, integrating multiple cultures, multiple beliefs, practices, hard and soft technologies. The difference between hard and soft is hard is objects, technology. Soft is how do you make gumbo in your head? Soft. Spiritual, political, visionary, and practical views, integrating all of those. So, multidisciplinary. Scientists who are political activists. Spiritual leaders who are also political activists. Who are social change agents. Creative artists who are effective outside their own industry. Athletes who are scholars and activists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't just do one thing. And multiplexual basically means you can basically pull in a whole bunch of elements together, create something new. So that's what I mean by 3M cubed. So Delaney, Du Bois is how we don't use the French pronunciation as America, which would be Du Bois. But Du Bois is what Americans usually call him, so fine. Okay, simplex, complex, multiplex. Multiple levels and dimensions and connections through time and space. So sometimes the fiction is more real than reality, or the fiction represents a reality we'd like to have come about. That's possible. So Blake, Du Bois' science fiction is actually pretty deep too. Yeah, wrote lots of great stuff. So we haven't talked about the strings of the Cora yet, so basically it's an idea to teach multiplexity, and I'll get to it at some point. So as an example, ethnic identity. This is what I call psychogeometry. So in the beginning of your life, psychologically, you begin to learn to separate yourself from your environment and to form an identity. So a baby learns about object permanence. So those of you who are parents have seen this happen. Baby freaks out when mom leaves the room. But baby soon figures out that mom still exists when mom ain't in the room anymore. That stage is called object permanence. Things exist when I don't see them. So chill. It's a psychological growth stage, just like being able to flip yourself over using your abdominal muscles without using your legs, or using your legs, which is the precursor to crawling. Crawling is the precursor to walking. Standing is the precursor to walking. Right? Each of those basically is showing you nervous system development. So baby learns about object permanence, expresses emotions, acquires language and learning, learns to eat, walk, and use its body. Now, the baby's brain is a computer, if you want to use those terms, that is programmed to absorb each and every language that's spoken around it. This is why many African children, without school, speak multiple languages. They may or may not learn them in school. They may be spoken around them. That's normal. So I'm just saying, black people in America, don't let America make you just speak English only. It's not your heritage. Multiple languages. So, a point is an experience, an emotion, a memory. Points added together make a line, just like you understand in geometry, right? A line is a series of points, some are which related, some of which may be off the wall or lead to other points, but let's stay with the line as it is. Family teaches baby how to use their emotions, mind, spirit, and culture. They may also allow the larger society to do this for them by sending them to school. Okay, so I'm an African American in America. I belong to an extended family which teaches me. First, our liberation canon, and then the traditional canon. Okay, I was taught we are the slaves that freed ourselves. And freeing ourselves requires that we have to know both the story and the story behind the story, and which one is a lie and which one is not. So we have to have that dual consciousness. If you're white, you are the bomb. If you're not white, then you will bomb. As most have said, success versus suspect in Mr. Nigger, which it's available on iTunes, whatever. Second day of Kwanzaa, Kujichagulia. How do you self-define yourself? Are you a slave? Are you a maroon? Are you a master of yourself? So, dimensions of ethnic identity, activist and also assimilationist. So, all four lines. So, spiritual line, emotional line, body line, and mental line. So, So the idea is that you have each one of those points, those lines that make up a square, are made up of a series of points that gives you an identity. And those experiences can be deepened. In fact, we say this. Well, that's deep. It can only be deep if you have some dimensionality to them. So, for example, how do you produce a productive, loyal, patriotic, unquestioning citizen? Patriotic, loyal, productive, unquestioning, even when your country betrays you. Multiple times. How do you do that? Say again, lie. Well, you have to believe the lie.
A lot of faith in your higher self.
Maybe, yes, you could. You could also be this could be, for example, there was a piece, what's the negative term for a person who, a black person who is unquestionably loyal to America? Uncle Tom. Okay. So, how many of you have read Uncle Tom's Cabin? So, did Uncle Tom act to free the slaves, or? Okay. So, interesting that Uncle Tom became the example. Basically, he was putting on an act. The shuffling was an act to free slaves, and he got killed by who? He got killed by 2 black people under the direction of an overseer. Okay? The black people who were obeying the overseer and who were beating Uncle Tom to death because he helped slaves escape.
And Uncle Tom's the Uncle Tom.
Okay? So understand, what Harriet Beecher Stowe was looking at, right? And there's a, Skip Gates, Henry Louis Gates wrote an annotated version of Uncle Tom's Cabin, where he talks about that. He said, it was, mask, that was an act. He was like a covert operative. But we don't really use that within the term Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom is somebody who doesn't make trouble.
You ever read this book called The Spook Who Sat by the Door?
Right. Now, The Spook Who Sat by the Door was actually written by a brother who was in the CIA. He's writing about himself. And he's basically...
He's so tight.
Yeah, he was... It's an interesting video and a book. You should check it out. They're both available. Oh, yeah. They made it into a movie in the 70s. The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Came out in the 70s.
I didn't know there was a movie.
Yeah, there's a movie. Yeah. Movie based on the book. Okay? And so, he was playing an Uncle Tom within the CIA because the CIA was only using him for window dressing. And he leaves the CIA and gets some money in a foundation to work with gang-related kids who he organizes into a revolutionary army. The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Yeah. Anyway, so Uncle Tom is a covert, he's a covert operative. But the way it's used in black culture is somebody who basically is subservient and believes in supporting the white power structure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? You might consider, for example, Colin Powell in my poem, I have respect for him, for what he is and what he does. Because he's at least willing to stand up for certain principles. And part of why he, didn't run for president is because his wife was afraid that he'd get killed.
And he resigned because of his principles.
Yeah. But he just came out in terms of the article that I saw, he was on Bill O'Reilly's program, and he said, why should the Republican Party be the party of excluding voters? There's no voter fraud. Thanks. All right, so there's a model about how, when I put up here activist assimilationist, there's a model about people who remain pro-America even though they know that America is going to betray them. or kill them for taking a righteous stand, or revile them. What does it take to do that? It's a question you don't have to answer, especially since we have 2 minutes. Now, you can also construct an anti-identity, because there are ethnic anti-identities. Right? You can basically take on a criminal, gangster, or ghetto mentality in the sense of not understanding why you got forced into that choice, or even understanding that you got forced into that choice. You took it on, and it was predictable. And part of how that happens is by not necessarily paying attention to, all right, you can be aware, you can be conscious of higher principles. I will give that to Tupac and some other folks. Should have worn that vest though that night.
Which one?
Tupac.
Which night?
Yeah, right, I know. Exactly. Okay? If you know they're after you, always be on your guard. All right, we'll continue this on Wednesday. See you later. Thank you, sir.